Hello, everyone. We have a jam-packed episode today. First, I sit down with Tejas Dessai from GlobalX, a leading ETF provider known for their focus on disruptive technologies. We talk about the AI big picture, so its impact on the economy, innovation, even the defense industry. It's a fascinating look at how artificial intelligence could shape the markets from here. But don't go anywhere, because after Tejas, we roll straight into a conversation with Andrea Mondello, an AI consultant at Withum. She breaks down several ways she's seeing businesses and even individuals use AI right now to boost efficiency and profitability. Two great conversations, back to back. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. As always, my name is Austin Hageman, and a big welcome to Tejas Dessai today. Welcome.
Yeah, awesome.
Tejas,
thanks for having me.
Of course. Tejas joins us from GlobalX, a leading U.S. ETF issuer managing tens of billions in assets across more than 80 funds. He leads GlobalX's thematic research efforts as Director of Research. Tejas joined GlobalX in 2022 as a research analyst covering technology themes and products with a focus on disruptive technologies, including artificial intelligence, robotics, cybersecurity, social media, gaming, and digital advertising. His research has been extensively covered in the tech and financial press, including the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the Washington Post, Business Insider, and Reuters. He routinely publishes his insights on the GlobalX website, covering disruption and structural trends transforming the global economy with a focus on themes such as defense technology, artificial intelligence, and data centers. Tejas holds a Bachelor of Technology in Electronics and Communications Engineering from the National Institute of Technology, GOA, and earned his Master's of Engineering in Industrial Engineering from North Carolina State University at Raleigh. Welcome to Amplified Wealth, Tejas.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share our insights with your audience.
Of course. So, you track some of the most exciting trends in the economy. When friends and family ask you what you do, what's your 30-second answer?
Well, the 30-second answer is we get to be experts on these trends that are reshaping the global economy, the structural changes, talk about nuclear power, robotics, cybersecurity, or even social media, gaming. Many of, again, friends and family see their children spending more time playing games, consuming entertainment in a very different fashion. They're excited about buying EVs and their Teslas. And we really get paid effectively to understand these trends and communicate them to our clients and investors.
It seems like from your college years, you may have known what you wanted to do when you grew up, type of thing. What sparked your interest in disruptive technologies?
Well, as you laid out there, I have an engineering and technology background. And I think up until grad school, I was pretty convinced that I was going to spend my career mainly focusing on research or working for maybe one of the largest technology companies. That's sort of the traditional path there. But I was always fascinated by finance and investing. And although I didn't have the conventional sort of background, I did apply for jobs. Luckily, ended up getting into this amazing a boutique sell-side firm, which was my previous role, working for this guy who had spent the last 3 decades covering technology stocks and was looking for a refreshed perspective. And while I looked at many of the patterns, many of the technologies from a very thematic and technology-focused lens, he added the financial angle of it, and that sort of gave me my start on the street. Spent 5 years doing that, and then for the last 3 years, I've been covering technology and now thematics for GlobalX. And I think that's one of the beauties of this disruption-driven world of investing, which is there's always room for new ideas because effectively you're talking about dissecting these trends, technologies, and really thinking about where the puck is moving versus where things have been. When you think about AI, robotics, cybersecurity, there's very little precedent to understand the commercialization of these technologies, and I think that's the opportunity. That needs to be addressed, and the gap that even firms like GlobalX try to fill.
Right. I can see that sense of always looking forward, always trying to get a sense of that new, right? That seems like it could get tiring and maybe sometimes frustrating.
I think learning new things and relearning new things is an important part of what we try to do. I think when you think about thematic investing at a high level, we have a very specific sort of framework that we utilize to try and understand the impact of many of these opportunities. To give you an example, we look at things like the S-shaped adoption curve, where specific technologies are transitioned through multiple stages as they evolve through their life cycle. That is true across a wide range of technologies and trends that we cover, right? The other thing is, for example, when we evaluate themes, we look for large addressable markets that run into hundreds of billions of dollars and trillions of dollars, which feeds back into our conviction for a specific theme, specific innovation that we're evaluating in the marketplace as well. There's many fun aspects of the work too. You get to meet with fascinating people. You get to engage with fascinating companies that are pioneering many of these innovations. We were at CES earlier this year, meeting with many of the companies pushing the frontier on robotics, on AI chip making. Last year we were out in Silicon Valley talking to some of the chip companies that are trying to compete against NVIDIA in the AI inference market. So there's a lot of fun that we can have on the job as well, and I think that makes it super exciting.
That's exciting. So we have, speaking of exciting, we have an exciting show centered on AI today. But before we even get to AI, let's talk about where the U.S. economy is right now. From your perspective, how healthy is the economic environment?
Sure, a great point to start. We think the economic backdrop is pretty healthy. I think we have some ups and downs that we're navigating right now post-Liberation Day. If you go back to the pre-Liberation Day period, we had a pretty healthy labor market. Unemployment was under control, inflation was moderating, and corporate investment was peaking as well. If you look at S&P 500, you had pretty decent profitability. Companies were beating extremely high margins and estimates, and which ties back into this whole automation era evolution that we're talking about, right? So I think the economic backdrop was pretty resilient. I think tariffs did cause some uncertainty or did cause some volatility into that mix, but it seems like we may be in a much better shape than expected when all this generally began. And I do think that we have very strong undercurrents like the innovation that we're seeing with artificial intelligence that can help us grow at a much faster rate and really overcome some of these hurdles that we're seeing here right now. On the other side, you also have investments moving into reshoring, data center construction and areas like that as well, which we can go over in a bit. But generally, I would think that the positives certainly outweigh the negatives or the weaknesses in the broader economic backdrop right now.
So in your view with AI, it's more like we're installing a turbocharger into an engine that's already running smoothly, not trying to resuscitate a broken down car. Is that fair?
That is fair. I think innovation has played a very important role historically in driving the US economy forward. You go back to the oil age, go back to the early industrial days, you go back to the age of the internet, the chip era, the mobile smartphone computing era. So much of the growth that we have seen has come from a new technological paradigm shift that drives things forward. And I think the US industrial machine is really well designed and responsive to making investment decisions, capital allocation decisions, business decisions to capitalize on a wave like this. And I think AI, quite frankly, is bigger, more impactful, and more transformative than anything that we have seen in the past. I think this is a Internet 2.0 moment, if we were to use a recent analogy and draw comparisons, but probably 5 to 10 times bigger as it plays itself out. At a high level, I think there's really two parts to that story, and we can get into each one of those. But there is the productivity aspect, which I think is very well discussed. Artificial intelligence can make us more profitable, more productive, focused on things that only matter. And the other side of it is trillions of dollars in investment that needs to happen to make AI possible. And I think both of those factors are going to be the drivers of this new economic engine.
What do you think? I think a lot of the media is spending a lot of time on the hype around AI. What do you think the risk is that we might be overestimating how quickly AI can deliver that kind of broad productivity boost?
I think there is a timing factor to it. How fast can we achieve the gains that we are really looking for. I think there's multiple nuances that we need to take into consideration here relative to maybe the internet or some of the other sort of information age productivity benefits or information age paradigm shifts that we have seen in the past. And I say this because I think AI is really colliding the technology universe with the physical world, right? So I think the adoption of artificial intelligence is closely tied to how fast we can ramp up and bring the infrastructure, which is closely tied to how fast we can bring more power online, more physical resources, physical commodities, right from copper to lithium to rare earths to many other technologies. And that feeds back the information and the automation age, and then again drives more capital towards those investments, right? So I think this collision of the technology world and the physical world is very unique. What we need to understand is that the physical world generally tends to be a bit more lumpy, moves in capital cycles that are completely different versus the pace of the technology world. And I think along the way, as this curve sort of keeps moving forward, you will see this constant dislocation between both of these areas, right? And I think the risk is that at some point, the dislocation goes in a way that it looks like a hype that is playing out. But I think the upside there and the opportunity there is the moment you have a pullback, I think investors or allocators should be thinking about getting more exposure to AI. Because one thing is clear, I think 10 years down the line, you will have businesses, you will have technology that uses AI, leverages AI, grows much faster versus everything else that gets left behind. And you need to be exposed to this forward-looking shift going forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think of AI, it's almost like electricity in the early 1900s. At first, it just lit up rooms, but over time, it powered factories, refrigerators, radios, and eventually every part of daily life. So, right now we have the AIs of the world, the chat GPTs, helping us polish emails and things like that. But what more could it do? But then also, what's the timing between now and that point in time where it does become that, total, productivity booster throughout our days?
Great framework to use there to think about how long the electricity really took to get to 100 million households, power factories. Early on, majority of the adoption that you had seen of power and electricity was on the commercial side alone. And then ultimately you sort of saw that, household expansion. Households also had to create the budget for consuming power. Really, there is a sort of economic case that needed to unfold there as well. When you think about AI, I think we have to consider a few factors here. Number one, the models that we have today are significantly smarter in many cases and improving rapidly in many cases than I would say human level intelligence, right? I think many of these models that you have today, frontier models, are competing against graduate level intelligence, PhD level intelligence, even in certain specific cases. And most of these models have been trained on, I would say, junk data that is available online and that is publicly available to everyone, right? So the question that we need to sort of consider here is how good can a system like GPT-4 that launched maybe a year ago can be if it is trained specifically on privileged corporate information, maybe our personal health records, maybe data and information that is siloed and is in specific sort of areas, but can be super impactful in that particular area, right? And I think so. The point I'm trying to paint here is that this is a multi-spectrum opportunity, and you can't really look at it as okay, we will all have super intelligence, and then AI is going to deliver X% of productivity gains. I think in terms of adoption, the stats that we look at to build our conviction are these. ChatGPT gets nearly 700 to 800 million weekly active users, and no other platform has been able to reach that scale in such a short period of time. Here in the US, our estimates suggest that an average user spends roughly 20 minutes interacting with ChatGPT every single day. And I would say that the engagement rates are much higher for professionals, for white-collar professionals, for knowledge workers on this particular platform. When you think about platforms like Instagram, when you think about platforms like TikTok, although not direct comparisons to ChatGPT, think about the amount of time or the number of years that those platforms really took to get to that level of stickiness or relevance in consumers' lives, right? So you have this solution that has extremely strong stickiness and very high engagement numbers with a very powerful underlying technology that's driving it. Now you just need to take that public acceptance of this technology, take this existing technology that is getting cheaper and cheaper every single day, and apply it more broadly to a wide range of applications. The innovation that you saw from China earlier this year with DeepSeek is one step in that direction to expand the applicability of AI. You get more chips, more solutions along the line. So again, back to your original analogy, this is very much like the electricity revolution, where many of these stages are being built, as we speak, and that's going to drive more usage and more application across the board.
So you mentioned China. There's a discussion out there about who will lead the AI race globally. Some say it's already decided. Other people think it's still wide open. Where do you think the U.S. stands right now in terms of AI leadership, and what factors matter most in leading the wave?
I believe the US is at least 2 to 3 years ahead of China when it comes to AI. China has had a significant advantage or a significant head start when it comes to AI with algorithms, with software, with data, with information. Many of these Chinese technology companies, if you go back to 2016 and 17 and 18, you've seen tremendous amounts of innovation coming on the software and algorithmic side of things from China. Be it companies like ByteDance or Baidu or Alibaba or some of the others there. What we saw with DeepSeek earlier this year is not very different from that side of the story, where the US builds, China commercializes, and expands applications, right? I think the US still has a very definitive lead when it comes to chip making, right? And NVIDIA is a clear leader in that space today. I think the newer platforms that NVIDIA is launching and bringing to market are significantly better than anything that the Chinese can produce. So from that perspective, it is very important that global technology companies, be it in China, in Europe, in India, or other parts of Asia, continue to use NVIDIA's rails, continue to use the infrastructure that's provided by US technology companies. And I think that's really the defensive frontier for the US tech industry to continue to innovate on this revolution, right? I think on the commercialization side as well, although Chinese AI had a very strong advantage and has shown significant innovation, I would say that the rest of the world, if given a choice, would feel much more comfortable and prefer using American technology solutions, than going with Chinese solutions. Because on the security side, I think there's a very different perception. At the same time, data localization and other rules, they work very differently. And mind you, US Tech has very good experience of commercially and profitably operating at the global scale as well, which I think will come very handy. So all that to say, I think the US leads the rest of the world. Number 2 player is China. US is 2 to 3 years ahead. And I think retaining our semiconductor leadership is very important to be able to retain that AI leadership.
So I remember when DeepSeek was originally announced, or maybe it was leaked, and that fear it sparked within the NVIDIA investor group, and NVIDIA sold off pretty well that day. Do you think investors should be worried about concentrating in what we see now as the top AI names, or do you think that those names are pretty well insulated?
I think there should be a general aversion towards concentration in any market. I think DeepSeek's situation showed us what it could do to returns overall if you're not cautious with valuations or not thinking about the AI story more broadly. Our view on this is AI is not a single company opportunity. This is transformative and will split the broader sort of economy into the haves and the have-nots, right? So I think it is very important that investors need to think about this in a way which, again, get exposure to the winners of the AI revolution, but don't lose sight of the large bunch of sort of long-tail participants that will drive the AI story forward. When you think about just the hardware equation, there's so much beyond the GPU itself that goes into making AI hardware possible. High bandwidth memory, for example, is extremely essential as the context windows of these AI models expand. So you want to be able to throw more information at these models. High-speed interconnect systems or networking chips, extremely important to that that overall equation as you connect more clusters of AI into that mix. And so companies like Broadcom and even smaller companies like Astera Labs and many others are trying to make a dent in that particular market. Then there is the AI infrastructure space. You have companies like CoreWeave and many others, as well as the hyperscalers trying to capitalize on that opportunity as well. So this is to say that you have to look at the AI opportunity with a very, very broad lens. You have to get exposure to the entire value chain. Otherwise, you risk being isolated to a specific value chain, and then events like DeepSeek really put those sort of theses in question.
Right. Yeah. As you were talking, my mind was immediately going to like the Nokias or Blackberries, right, where they had the market leadership, and then they were overtaken. I mean, the next generation today probably doesn't even really know what a BlackBerry is. It was almost erased from history. But at one point in time, it's what everyone had in their pocket.
Think about the internet companies of the 90s and how many of those companies ended up earning the majority of profits from the internet cycle over a long period of time. So a first mover advantage certainly, I think, puts you in a good position in the short term, but you have to continue to invest to be able to defend that. That's not to say that NVIDIA will not exist or will not capitalize on the AI wave. I think based on evidence, we already know that they are very good investors. They look at these trends way before the market anticipates them, make very good capital allocation decisions. But there will be other opportunities that open up along the way. And if you go back to any technological paradigm in the past, you will see that technology paradigms generally unfold in three phases. First phase is where you have the hardware layer being built, where the chips are being created, right? Even if you will think about the internet, Intel or companies like that really democratized access to personal computing devices, made the chips possible. The second stage is where I think you have a lot of abstracted infrastructure, right? Software platforms that make it possible to build end user experiences on that technology that's underlying. And then finally, it's the application age. And when it comes to AI, we have barely scratched the surface of the application age. So I think you have to stay broad, you have to keep an open mind, and I think that's the only way to capitalize on innovative waves that are this profound as they unfold.
Right. So you bring up a good point about that cycle. When people imagine AI, they often think of software and algorithms, but there's this massive physical side to it, from chips to data centers to the power grid. What does it actually take to build the backbone that AI runs on, and where are we in the process?
The backbone is extremely resource intensive and capital intensive. I think we are still in the early days of designing this AI industrial complex, if you will, which I think consists of, number one, data centers. These are gigantic AI factories that produce and operate AI 24/7. The other side of it is making the semiconductors, the chips that actually go into that AI factory. And we'll get to that in a bit with reshoring and everything else. But the third leg of that stool, in my view, is electricity, power, but also cooling, water, and other resources that go into that. But when you think about leading in AI, or the US leading in AI, we have to be able to do all three of these things here domestically on US mainland, and then export the output of that, which is really smart algorithms, out to the rest of the world. And I think that is the direction in which we are proceeding, and we are extremely early in making that happen. To give you a comparison, the largest AI cluster that operates today was built by xAI somewhere in Memphis, Tennessee, operates roughly on 200,000 GPUs. But when you look at the number of GPUs that will be needed to run artificial intelligence at its full scale, maybe 10 years down the line, we're talking about nearly 100 million installed units across the world. So I would say we are still maybe 2 to 3% penetrated into building the data centers, the AI clusters that are needed to run these models at scale. And again, back to your original point, that's what's keeping us from realizing the full potential of AI, because we just don't have the chips ready. The second component of it is to install these chips, we have to make these chips. And we just don't have enough capacity to do that. So far, we're making these chips in Taiwan, but we're moving that to regions like Arizona here stateside. And I think we have to be able to produce these chips locally. The third aspect of it is power, a very important aspect. And these chips are extremely power hungry. Training ChatGPT consumes significant amount of power. Like every single ChatGPT query on an average today consumes the power equivalent of running a light bulb for nearly 20 minutes. So there is a significant power cost associated with it. And so the US has to produce more power to run these data centers. And I think that physical backbone of it is really taking shape, but we're still in early days when it comes to that.
Sure. You could see how just the infrastructure alone creates all these jobs and economic growth for areas outside of the actual AI company itself, which I think a lot of people, they just think over, right? They think about the end company, the end AI company. But, when you're talking about the massive amounts of water, these, AI clusters, I guess, use up, or the power, or just the building of the infrastructure, things like that. It really is touching a lot of parts of our economy just on the infrastructure alone, just that initial stage.
It is. I think infrastructure development is an overlooked and under-discussed macro theme. I think, generally speaking, investors, financial markets have looked at infrastructure, be it transportation services, materials, the infrastructure developers, as this sleepy, boring corner of the market, doesn't move much. But back to my original point, that technology, where the opportunity is rapidly colliding with the physical world, right? So we have to ramp up the build out of many of these facilities. Look at what's happening with data center construction here in the US. I saw this chart where data center construction is now overtaking the construction that we have on commercial and office buildings here in the US as well, which I think is a very secular trend. Again, we've not seen this level of disruption in the physical world, and I think that takes a lot of more, more sort of understanding to really wrap our minds around what's happening here. The other side of it is this is not just about constructing data centers, like you said, right? Look at power. Look at the power grid. Look at power production facilities. The U.S. power grid was not designed for the AI age. It was designed for a period when the population was probably 40 to 50% lower than where it is today. Projections right now suggest that data centers could consume nearly 10 to 12% of all of U.S. electricity by the end of this decade. So where do you really bring this power from, and how do you transmit this power in the existing grid? So I think trillions of dollars will likely be directed in terms of capex to really bring that capacity of power production online, but also to revamp the power grid to make sure that these data centers can get the right amount of power that they need.
Yeah, as you're talking about this need for ramp up of infrastructure based on these bottlenecks, based on us not being built for this new AI economy, it brings me back to fiber internet. So back in the early 2000s, you know this, but for our viewers, fiber internet didn't just slow down, it hit a wall. It was like building a super highway to every city, but then there was no one who really had cars yet. So half the lanes just sat there empty while road crews picked up and went home. Is that a risk right now with AI? Or is there something you see that will prevent that? Is that just a risk that you're always going to have to face building out an infrastructure for a new technology like this?
That's a risk you will always have to face no matter what, especially when it comes to building physical infrastructure that goes in line with technology. Well, the good news there is we are extremely early in this build out phase, right? So I think, if you consider ChatGPT as the marker, we're barely, I would say, 36 months into this build-out period, and I think this build-out will continue to move forward. Some of the key things that are different, I would say, relative to the fiber build-out that we had seen during the internet age is, number one, today, majority of the investments around infrastructure are being driven by really profitable technology companies that have a resilient balance sheet and that who can afford to invest. Right? I think that's very important. If you look at the fiber build out or the telco build out during the dot-com bust, a lot of that was driven by private equity money, but also you had these telco companies who already had pretty stretched balance sheets, so they had to be more, let's just say, aggressive in terms of making these allocations, in terms of pulling back spending when there was no return on that spending. Contrast that to what's happening today. Big tech is able to drive returns. Look at a company like Meta Platforms, for example, that is investing so aggressively in AI. They grew 22% last quarter. And this is in a period when we had so much tariff-related volatility and they had all the excuse for ad spending to be generally pulled back. So I think we are underestimating the ROI or the addressable market that many of these AI technologies can capture in a very short period of time. And that's really the opportunity that these companies are going after. As long as we can keep that ROI loop closed and tight, I think the risk to AI infrastructure pullback is minimized.
So once the foundation is in place, the real world applications are where most people will actually feel AI in their lives. Is this transformation, in your opinion, going to be specific to one or two industries, or is there a much larger economic impact here?
In our view, the impact of AI is going to be extremely broad. It will touch pretty much every sector of the economy. Every single task that can be automated will be automated. And I think when you think about how knowledge workers operate across healthcare, financial services, the technology industry, there is significant scope for mundane tasks to be automated and for productivity to be unlocked. And I think that's the first frontier of innovation and opportunity unlock. Think about what's happening with software development today and how productive developers generally are becoming because they're using more AI. When you think about cybersecurity in financial services, maybe compliance, reporting, there's several processes where AI can add a lot of impact. But beyond that, I think this is a consumption expansion story when we see more consumer-focused apps and services come to market because of AI. Right? If you think about a product like Uber, for example, which essentially became possible because of the smartphone revolution, the whole idea of ordering a cab on your phone with one click within a couple of minutes didn't exist 20 years back. And now it's such a massive market, and that is pushing us towards this whole autonomous driving and self-driving and robotaxi revolution. I think AI is going to be very similar to that. It's very hard to visualize the applications that we will see 10 years down the line. But I do see a lot of opportunity when it comes to travel booking, when it comes to getting access to good quality medical care, when it comes to accessing financial solutions and services, and really expanding the total addressable market for many of these sectors of the economy.
Very interesting. So what I'm hearing is, there should theoretically be a boost to your traditional companies, everything from the financial services to the discretionaries to the staples, the Walmarts of the world, right? This isn't a technology focused wave, although technology will be a catalyst in helping these companies become more profitable. But then also what's interesting here is, what is that new? What is that new profit source going to be? Where is that going to come up? How is that going to be used? Is that going to be something that an existing company takes advantage of, or is it going to be a whole new company like Uber?
There's two sides to that story. I think the market always, whenever you have a new paradigm shift, the market always develops with a few incumbents reinventing and reinvesting at a much faster pace than everybody else. And as a result of that, they capture more share of that market. And there's always disruptors that come in and expand the market or create a new opportunity entirely. We've had so many examples in the past. Think about Facebook, think about Airbnb, think about Uber, and countless other examples. So I think you will see winners emerge in both of those categories. When you go back to the internet cycle also, I think, of course, we have Amazon, which became this massive behemoth selling products online. But you also have Walmart, which is doing a very decent job of catering to the e-commerce audience, and many of the other traditional retailers. So I think we have to pay attention to who invests, who leverages AI to their advantage, but also pay attention to this entire AI value chain and the winners that are pushing the frontier forward in that category as well.
So I'm gonna link two thoughts here. So bear with me for a second, but you mentioned something that sparked this in my head. So AI-related investments in 2025 has contributed more to economic growth than the entire gain from consumer spending. Since consumption normally dominates, this suggests AI is acting like a massive private sector stimulus, which I think is crazy. There's also been a lot of talk about the fiscal deficit and how historically high our debt to GDP ratio is. Do you think the US can realistically count on AI to help right size that ratio via growth through AI boosting GDP?
I think that is possible. I think if we continue to lead in, let's just say, the semiconductor layer of AI, and then ultimately that translates into the application layer of AI, and we're able to export more technology and more solutions on one hand, while driving more consumption and consumer growth here in our domestic market as well, I think we can possibly grow at a much faster rate than the rest of the world. And as a result of that, continue to again to expand the GDP and bring it where it needs to go. And I think that is entirely possible. because AI touches pretty much every sector of the economy. Again, when you think about healthcare services, the AI that is being produced here in Silicon Valley and in California can be trained somewhere else on localized data sets and drive innovation in that particular market and pull profits out of that market. And again, bring that back here stateside. We're already moving a lot of the chip production and critical industries of the future here in the United States as well. And I think reshoring, again, is such an important part of driving that long-term GDP growth story as well. When it comes to reshoring, I think the media is overly focused on maybe some of the longer tail commoditized industries. The real value is in making pharmaceutical products here in the United States, making semiconductors here in the United States, again, making highly strategic and necessary optical components, networking chips, and things like that, which will keep this innovation cycle moving forward. So I think, yes, AI to a certain degree can be the answer to driving GDP growth much faster than we're seeing today.
So speaking of that boost and the changes that we may or may not see, and I've been waiting to ask this question since I knew we were going to do this interview with you. How realistic is physical AI like humanoid robots in our day-to-day lives over the next decade? Is that something, can I look forward to a robot making me breakfast in the morning in the next 10 years?
I think you will, yes. Wow. We are extremely bullish on physical AI and the physical application of automation to the real world. There's two things to consider there. I think the hardware systems necessary to make physical AI happen, to design the robot, the body of the robot, the arm, the humanoid form, is in pretty good shape and has been in very good shape in terms of the innovation curve that it has followed for the last 10 years. Think about the videos that we've been seeing about Boston Dynamics for the last 10 years on YouTube and everywhere in social media of a robot jumping, a hurdle or moving things from place A, point A to point B. The brain of the system, the AI that really drives that robot, has only gotten better today, and it continues to sort of move on a very rapid pace of innovation and improvement. And I think that's the real unlocker, which is when you combine the brain and the physical system, you can really create all these new possibilities to deploy the technology into the real world. The other important aspect of it is capital cycles, again, move on its own pace. And it seems like right now you have the largest technology companies, think about Tesla, think about NVIDIA, really thinking and taking this technology seriously. So I think it is possible that we see humanoids and we see physical robots operating and doing things in environments where environments that are not possibly designed for human beings to continue to sort of work on or spend their hours in. And one classic example that I can think of is think about a distribution center or logistics center. Amazon has a attrition rate of over 100% over 18 months inside their logistics, and development center. So every single employee that starts working inside a distribution center will quit within 18 months, at Amazon. That just goes to say that the demands that these systems place on us, we have to solve for these in completely different ways. And I think those are the areas where automation is really likely going to push the frontier on. One last thing I will say there, going back 100 years, let's think about the automotive industry. And I think the humanoids industry is going to unfold very similarly to how the car industry had unfolded in its early days, where you have this machine that costs maybe, today inflation adjusted $40,000 on average, but can save you a lot of time and can make your life significantly easier as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, how scary and exciting all this is at the same time. So speaking of scary, and also touching on our conversation about that new technology that we don't even know quite what it could be at this moment. Defense is often where new technologies prove themselves before they show up in civilian life. How do you see AI changing the defense landscape over the next decade?
I think it is a game changer. If you think about what's happening with defense today, number one, the geopolitical backdrop continues to worsen every single day. I think when you think about how we have conventionally thought about defense, with majority of our spending going towards these conventional ammunition systems, guns, bullets, what have you, tanks, ships, I think we have reached the peak in terms of those systems acting as a deterrent to continue to resolve conflict going forward. they have a very important role to play. But I think AI technology expands the frontier of this application, allows us to anticipate a lot of things and really act based on that. So I think in the security angle of the future, AI has a very definitive role to play. And the government generally seems to be extremely receptive to commercial technology and to commercial AI for the first time, like they have never been, in the past. Classic example of that, look at Palantir, for example, and how fast they've been able to grow into that particular market. So when you think about warfare of the future, there's really three areas where we tell clients to pay attention to. Number one is AI and software and the whole data analysis complex. Number two is autonomous drones and autonomous weaponry. Number three is cybersecurity, which is, again, an important part. And I think AI touches pretty much all three of those.
So it's going to be more about smarter systems than bigger weapons at this point. It's no longer going to be who's carrying the biggest stick. It's, who has the smartest systems.
Absolutely. A war that is avoided, a conflict that is avoided is a conflict that you don't fight and you don't have to worry about, right? So I think systems are evolving towards a more predictive deterrent stance, if you will. A lot of this approach has already been applied in the past. When you think about how intelligence agencies, in the US or elsewhere have operated, it's all about collecting information, processing it, and trying to find signals. Now that we're producing information at scale and at such a volume, we need a new approach to look at this. And I think that's the gap that AI fills.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I appreciate your time today talking about AI. On a personal side, looking ahead, what's one thing in your life, work, could be work related, could be personal, it could have to do with AI or not. What are you most excited about right now?
Well, on the personal front, I would say I just became a dad about 4 months back. So
that's awesome.
We have a 4-month-old at home. And so, although the sleep cycle, we can talk about that some other time, but overall, it's an exciting phase of our life. And I'm really looking forward to that. But on the other side, I'm also picking up a lot of AI tools, and this is fascinating technology that we're trying to stay on top of. We are very savvy in terms of the tools and technologies that we use here at GlobalX as well. We're forward thinking not only in our investment approach, but the way we do our day-to-day operations as well. And that's one of the things that I plan on continuing to do for the next few months here, trying to find areas where we can continue to drive our productivity internally as well.
That's great. That's great. And congratulations on the new baby. I can tell you what I'm most excited about speaking to you is I always have this long to-do list, most of which my wife has put on my to-do list of scheduling doctor's appointments, going to the store, refreshing certain parts of my wardrobe, things like that. For me to basically just be able to offload that onto AI. So it could schedule those meetings for me, because for whatever reason, I have no trouble getting stuff done for clients. But when it comes to my personal to-do list, it's always, I'll get to it. And I always come home to my wife giving me that disappointing, mom look of, so what didn't you do today? So I'm personally excited for me to be able to say, hey, ChatGPT, or hey, this AI, that AI, I need to get these doctor's appointments scheduled, look at my calendar, reach out to these different providers and get that done for me. I think that will be a huge burden lifted off my shoulders.
Which again brings back to my original point also, which is think about how early we are in this cycle. Now, the only tool that people use today is ChatGPT, but there's 5 or 15 different apps that we use for our daily lives every single day. I think each one of those is an opportunity for AI to bring something new to market.
Very good. Very good. Well, again, I appreciate your time. To our listeners, always appreciate you coming in and listening to our show. Please remember to like, follow, and share, all that fun stuff. And we will see you at the next episode. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Austin, for having us.
All right. That was Tejas Dessai with a big picture view on AI. Now let's shift gears and hear from Andrea Mondello on some real-world applications of artificial intelligence. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Amplified Wealth. My name is Austin Hageman, and I'm here with Andrea Mondello. Hello, Andrea. So Andrea leads Withum's data and AI service team. She has helped organizations around the globe implement, adopt, and derive value from Microsoft technologies. She has over 15 years of experience focused on SharePoint solutions with a knowledge management lens and 9 years of deep experience with Office 365. Her skill set includes project management, business analysis, change management, technology training, technology communications, and business process optimization. She's worked in multiple business verticals, including accounting, publishing, SEO, and digital and drug development, with a special focus on nonprofit and NGO organization programs and operations. Welcome to the show, Andrea.
Thank you, Austin. Thank you so much.
Of course. So I just had a very interesting conversation with Tejas Dessai, the director of research from GlobalX. He seems to believe that within the next 10 years, it's realistic to expect physical AI like humanoid robots in our day-to-day lives. What do you think about that?
I actually agree.
Really?
And the reason I agree with this is because it seems to be what people want. It seems to be, I think the market's going to drive what is being developed. And I think if you look at how people are using AI, so many people are using AI as a companion. And of course, there are whole business models being built around that. I think it's only natural that it is going to, we are going to see the, physical robots that have AI embedded.
Wow. Yeah, I think there was that a 60-minute show where they were talking about people going and having relationships with AI?
Yeah.
Is that? Yeah.
No, it's a big thing. I mean, it's scary. I think it's scary, but for some people that works for them. And also, if you think about it, we're almost there now. You think about, have you ever seen these little robot dogs that they have? With little, very basic AI built in, or,
right.
A Roomba, right? So I think we've been working our way up to this, and I think people now have gotten a taste of what it's like to talk to someone who makes them feel good,
right?
Which they may not have in their real lives. So,
right. Wow, that's very. I personally can't wrap my head around it. My brain's a pretzel trying to imagine having a humanoid AI in your space like that. But I guess if you told me in the late 90s that I'd have a personal computer in my pocket all the time, I wouldn't believe you either.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember I was working many, many, many years ago in accounting, and I'm old enough to remember our auditors coming and showing off their little computers that had Lotus 1-2-3 on it. You know what that is?
Yep, I do.
And this was like the biggest thing since sliced bread. And these little computers were about like this big, and now we just have, it's like you can do it on your iPad, right?
Right. Yeah, I remember there was I think it was an Excel commercial where the guy enters a elevator with his big laptop.
I've seen that old one, that old commercial.
And I'm sitting there saying, it's like the laptop's like this big.
And now we have Excel with AI in it, where you can ask a question or tell it to do something, or there's a brand new feature coming out for Excel that called the Copilot function, where you basically type at Copilot, and then it's like instead of a regular function, and then you tell it what you want it to do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So
that would be great. I've never been able to wrap my head around macros. So
all right. Well, then
that could be useful. But that brings us to the meat and potatoes of this part of the episode. You help businesses figure out how to best use AI, whether it's solving problems or creating efficiencies, and then you guide them through the implementation. So I thought it would be interesting for our viewers if you could share a few case studies to help us better understand how AI is being applied in the business world.
Yeah, sure. So, this is interesting. I will tell you, we work with businesses of lots of different sizes. In some cases, the mid-market is actually ahead of the big organizations because they have less process and less hoops to go through and less scrutiny. So that's always interesting to see. So one of our clients, you would consider them a communications agency. And so as an agency, they write communications for their clients to send out to their clients, right? So what we've done is they have all different clients. Each client wants their content written in a certain voice. So we've analyzed the voices of all the different clients. And we have created an application that takes that, and then they can say, okay, in this, voice, I want to write about this. Here are the facts that you need to include, et cetera, et cetera. And it produces newsletters. It produces, social media posts. So that's been a big boon to this organization. And I want to point out why this is so good, Austin. And I'll talk about a couple more case studies in a minute, but I want to point out why this is so good. And this is actually at Withum, this is our focus. This is focused around what the organization does to make money. Right? So this is not, there's a lot of usage of, ChatGPT, and I use it to write my email. I use it to do this. I use it to do that. Those are personal productivity gains. What this organization did that we helped them do is focus on an organizational gain, something that's going to further their business strategy. Do you see what I mean?
Right.
Because there's a lot. I just heard the editor of The Atlantic, if any of your folks read that magazine, and he does a thing that the most important thing in technology today. And in the last couple of days, he did one that said he was at a conference with all CEOs of, the largest major orgs, and they all were saying AI was not making the money. They weren't seeing any effect to the bottom line. And this is why. They're not putting it in the right place.
Okay.
So anyway, so that was one.
So you're saying that larger businesses, even smaller businesses, you think that there's a period where the company really needs to figure out how to make best use of it before they can turn its profitability.
It is. That is the deal. Companies think they want to start with an AI strategy. What we're hearing is a CIO coming to us saying, our board says we need an AI strategy. Mm-hmm. But our question back is, well, what's the business strategy? And so a lot of decisions here are being driven by FOMO, right? Fear of missing out.
Right.
And this is where you hear about these AI, proof of concept that go nowhere because it's driven by FOMO. It's not driven by a business thinking. Mm-hmm. It's like there are certain principles that don't go away no matter how the technology changes. Right. And here you need to focus on what does the business do? How does the business make money? And then enable that. What's your differentiator in the marketplace? And that's what we're very focused on when we work with clients, is looking at that first, starting with a business lens first, and then introducing the technology.
Right. And this period of figuring it out, and maybe spending money to figure it out, right? Because you have to make mistakes. You have to. You do. You have to move. It's move fast and break things, right?
A little bit, right?
This isn't unfamiliar. I remember when Facebook first went public, they basically went out to market and they said, "Listen, we have more information on your users, your end clientele than you could ever imagine. Let's use that for you to then push your marketing to people." And companies were like, that's great, but they didn't know how to do it because they were used to doing commercials on TV and newspapers and magazines and stuff like that. And there was this period of companies either not doing anything, freezing, or putting money in the wrong direction until they figured it out. And now we all know Facebook to be Facebook and this great source for companies to then advertise on, right?
Yeah. So, you may not get it right the first time, but our goal is to help you get as close to right as possible the first time. The good news is usually we're coming in after the first time because folks will try to do it, company will try to do it on their own. And, the other concern, of course, is governance. And how do we govern this within the organization? And here is where the small orgs normally get ahead of the big ones because they usually don't have as much governance. And how do we fit it into our process? Well, we don't really have a process, so it doesn't matter. Let AI be our process, Right. It's and they can kind of leapfrog. But eventually, I think that'll, you need process eventually to have a growing concern. So
right. And I bet it helps to work with somebody who has made the mistakes before, right? Who has spent the time playing around with it, right? To help kind of push that company forward in a direction.
What we see is and I'm sure you see it in other areas, like of what you do. What we see is a lot of people going for a home run instead of trying to just get to first base, get to second base, right? Get the base hits, do the basics.
Right.
They want to just do the moonshot right out of the gate, and they're not ready.
Right. What's the next get rich quick scheme?
Yeah, right. They need to, there's a certain level of technology, a certain level of training and comfort the folks in the organization have to have, that the executives have to have. So, you need to have that baseline first.
Right. So before we hop into another case study, you mentioned analyzing the voice. What does that mean? How are they doing that? Are they reading emails or content, other types of content?
No, we have given the client a way to feed in various already produced pieces, meaning they have, things that have already been vetted and created that the client is happy with. This is our voice. Then we feed that into this application, and the application analyzes it. And, if you just got ChatGPT, you could do some of this out of the box. But what we've done is add a lot of structure to this. So I'm not going to go into it because it's proprietary, but there are a lot of different ways to analyze voice and analyze writing. And, we're very specific. We very specifically go into all that. So. Okay.
So you feed it.
Makes a difference in the quality of the output.
Right. You feed the AI data, other articles, other items for it to read through, and that becomes the voice. And then you have a structure that also helps feed that.
That's right.
Very interesting. All right. Let's jump to a different company.
So we have created a WhatsApp app.
Okay.
So if you think about construction firms that have folks out in the field, and, people speak all different languages. So some of these folks may or may not speak English. So an industry like that, or, some other industry where you have field workers. And it's important to get information back to the home office quickly. So we've created an AI app that, and it sits on top of WhatsApp, which a lot of these folks will already have on their phone. And they can actually speak into WhatsApp and say, for instance, John has fallen and we have a safety incident on the job, and here's when it happened, and here's what happened, here's what I'm doing about it. Or this wall is not straight, and now the other wall, and, whatever. I'm not a construction person. So, things like that. And it translates that, it transcribes that, and it sends it, it figures out what this application uses AI to figure out what to do with it. So does it need to go to the safety officer? Does it need to be recorded in you can do your timesheet that way. You could say, I worked 5 hours on this site, and then I went to this other site and worked 3 hours, right? And just by saying that, it knows where to put that on your timesheet. So, it's being orchestrated in the background, and it's sending the information, to different databases, different applications, whatever your back-end applications are, HR, accounting, whatever happens to be.
Interesting.
Pretty cool.
That is very cool. So where the company may have needed multiple people who speak different languages, or one person that knows several different languages to receive these calls and to be on duty when the calls come in, you've figured out how to use AI to then receive it, replace that individual or individuals, and then also be able to know what to do with that information once they get it.
And that's the key, right? That routing that's happening.
Right.
And it knows when to escalate to a human. Right. So for instance, in the circumstance of an emergency on the job site, it knows what that means, and it escalates to a human. So it's very exciting. And it's not just, I would just say, this is not just about translation. Anybody who's worked with folks who have to go out in the field and do something and report on it knows that very often that reporting doesn't happen timely.
Right.
And if it doesn't happen timely, you miss stuff. Right. And the folks who go out in the field, and maybe you're a repair person, think of a repair person who goes out in the field to do a job. They don't like filling out a lot of paperwork.
Right.
But they love doing this because all they have to do is talk.
Yeah. I could see that being very convenient. I know myself when I have, a strand of 3 meetings in a row, right? I write notes down during the meetings and then I have to upload it to our CRM. But then at the end of the 3rd meeting, I'm going back thinking about the first one. I write something down. I'm not sure if I meant the right thing when I wrote it down. Everything was moving quickly. So I could totally understand how that could be super useful.
Austin, you could be using AI to do that.
I could be using AI to do that.
I use it for every single, where the client allows it. Some clients don't allow it. But if the client allows it, we use it for every single meeting. And it's fantastic for folks in professional services because sometimes the devil's in the details. And if you miss the detail, you get it wrong for the client. So we love using AI to record and transcribe our meetings, summarize, and then give us our action items.
Well, so it's not just a transcription, right? If so-and-so said this, so-and-so, it actually it briefs you and then gives you action items?
For a long time.
Wow.
This is now summarizing and giving you your action items. And then 3 days later or 30 days later, I can say to this application that, the one we use, hey, I don't remember. I know I had a meeting with Austin a month ago. I don't remember whether I finished all my action items. Can you refresh my mind? What were my action items from that meeting?
Wow.
It's fantastic.
So it's just like having a personal assistant sitting outside your office.
It's like having a personal assistant. We say, and that's the challenge, right? Is if you're not somebody who has been supervising other people, then this may be a little bit of a challenge for you because basically this is like having a personal assistant or an intern or what, you just have to remember that like an intern, you have to give them the context. You always have to give whatever these tools are. You always have to give it the context because they don't know the context.
Right. Yeah. I find that when I use ChatGPT or other AIs and when I'm communicating with having it help me, I need to correct it sometimes. I need to say, just so you know, we need to look at it from this aspect whenever we talk about this or something like that. So you have to treat it like a human.
Yeah, you do. You have to treat it like this person was just hired. They know nothing about what you do and they're good. They can do stuff for you, but they need that context and they need very specific instruction.
Right. They're a first year worker at the firm type of thing.
Exactly.
I like the case study on this construction company, mostly because it's a construction company. When you say construction company using AI, my brain first is like, well, that's impossible. They work with their hands, machinery, and then it's like, all right, well, maybe the AI is in the digging machinery. But no, what you're doing is you're letting the construction company do what it's good at. And that stuff on top, that layer on top that is more mundane and maybe not as fun or interesting for the individuals working at the construction company, AI has come in and been able to find a way to optimize it.
And I want to keep in mind for your listeners that there are 2 kinds of AI, really. There's the boring kind that we've had for many years, machine learning. And if you think about the simplest example of a business card reader, right? Everyone knows, you get these little business card reader and it scans your business and it pulls out the information and puts it in the CRM or whatever it happens to be. Like we've had that kind of thing forever, or read an invoice and pull out the information from the invoice. This new piece, the kind of sexy piece, is Gen AI, right? And that's the ChatGPT and the Copilot and the Claude and the Llama and all those, all that kind of stuff. And the machine learning stuff that's always been there is actually more reliable. AI is never 100%, but it's more reliable. And then you have the Gen AI, which is a lot cooler. But it's not as reliable, right? We've all heard about these hallucinations and these things and, and the issue is it's very convincing when it's wrong, right? So when businesses are thinking about AI, very often they're talking about Gen AI, but that's not what they need. Right. Very often what they need is more, traditional machine kind of learning. So again, let's not go for the moonshot. Let's think what's going to make you money.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Okay. Awesome. So how many case studies do you have?
I've got another case study, for you, Austin. So we had an organization that wanted to kind of run AI over their documents and be able to ask questions about their documents in their document management,
Okay.
storage. And that's a pretty common request. We get that a lot. The problem that they were having is they had tons of technical diagrams in these documents, and the AI on its own was not doing a good job of answering questions about the technical documents. It really wasn't understanding what the image was showing and what the whole point of the image was, and what the pieces were, and it just wasn't doing a good job. So we wrote, and I guess you would call it an accelerator. We built an accelerator that added on to the AI that the client was using that analyzed those documents in detail, so that you could ask a question about a document and say, where does that screw go?
Okay.
Or what is the, I don't know, the flange. I don't know. What is that thing? And, what do you have to do with it? Or what is its purpose in the technology? Or it was just really, honestly, really amazing. It really understands at that point. It looks at the image and really understands not just piece by piece, but puts it together and understands what it's about, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
That was I know that's very technical.
That's interesting.
But it's really interesting.
What is an accelerator? Is that a computer? Is that a program that you insert into the AI?
I'm using that term broadly. I'm glad you asked me that, Austin. We call anything an accelerator that we're enhancing something that already exists.
Okay.
To kind of make it better.
Okay.
So in this case, it was code that was making this better.
Okay. Interesting.
I'm not the person that writes the code, so I'm not going to go into it.
Very, very interesting.
I'm the person who understands the business problem.
So
right?
if you're trying to use AI, what my takeaway here is, as a non-AI person, although I guess we live in a world where we're all going to be AI people one day, is that if I'm using ChatGPT or one of these other, AI platforms, and I'm noticing that it is not comprehending what I think it should be comprehending, there is likely a way, or a possibility that there's a way to, have a team like yours come in, insert code or something like that, and it would actually be able to. So it's not like something didn't work, so it doesn't work. It's just it hasn't been trained in the way that I need it to work. Yeah.
Okay. And when we talk about ChatGPT or Claude or any of these are kind of general purpose models. Mm-hmm. There are models that are specific to specific domains. Okay. So there are ones that are better for finance, for instance, and understand finance better. So I don't want to say you always need to jump to code, to extra code. Sometimes it's just switching the model, and find the model that's right for what you need. And this is where we talk about, I will say, your listeners have probably heard about agents. There's a lot of, AI agent and agentic AI. And what does this all mean? All it means is it's kind of like what I was talking about before with the construction example, where AI can figure out, it doesn't just give you the answer, but it'll figure out what to do next. Oh, you're calling about and I'll talk about this use case in a minute, but you're calling about your insurance plan, your pension plan. Let's say your pension plan. You're calling about your pension plan. You want to know XYZ. Do you want me to send you a brochure? Or do you need me to update your date of birth or whatever it happens to be? And then if the person says yes, it goes off and talks to another agent that then talks to the database that can actually do that work. So you've got this whole orchestration of one agent that kind of orchestrates things, and then all these other agents that go out and do the work.
So it's a series of almost AI employees working together.
Yes.
Interesting.
It's almost like that. And I want to go back to your point about it doesn't do what I want it to do, right? Like, is it broken? Is it just not? I would say there were some use cases where, we still find it's a slow slog. There are just some things that Gen AI is not great at. Some of these models are not great at, but very often it has to do with the data you're sending it to. So for instance, we have worked with, a pension plan administrator. And the key there was, at first they had all these documents and they said, okay, AI, we're going to ask you a question about all these documents. Now, some models are really good at that.
Mhm.
Other models would rather look at just one document and do a
Right.
really good job about the one document.
Mhm.
So what the technology they were using, we said to them, no, let's just look at your, the plan document and this other, there were 2 or 3 documents we were going to look at, and we got great results. So again, you have to ask, what am I trying to do? And is the model I'm using the best model to do that thing?
Interesting. Now, I was at a conference where the person presenting was asking AI, I forget, I'm going to call it ChatGPT because that's just what's top of my head right now.
Some model,
Where ChatGPT couldn't do something and said, well, what AI program I could use? And ChatGPT actually suggested different AI programs it could use. That's basically how it works, right? That's
nothing wrong with that.
If your platform you're using isn't doing what you want it to do, you can ask it, hey, is there a better program for this? And it'll be, it's not going to be an employee and lie to you and say, oh no, I'm the best at it. It's going to say, oh well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it would, but
okay.
Maybe it would. But you see, if I got that answer from an AI, I would then not believe it. Do you know what I mean? You have to have a healthy skepticism about some of these things.
Right.
But in general, it will give you a good answer. It will give you a real answer. The other thing I would say, Austin, in this arena is each model has its own way it likes to be talked to.
Okay.
Think of it like a human. Here's my love language. That whole love language. So what I always do is when I'm trying to write a prompt, especially if it's, going to be a complicated request, I actually ask that model, that AI, to write the prompt for me. So I say, you, and I'll just use myself, you are a consultant, and this is what you do. And a client has this problem and you are trying to solve this problem, trying to whatever, and write the prompt that I should use to get a good response, a detailed response. And then it writes the prompt, and I always tell it, and tell me why it's a good prompt, because that helps me learn what that model wants me to do. So
instead of just prompting the model, you're asking the model, how should I prompt you to get the best results? And that's interesting. That's
very interesting.
That's some real outside of the box thinking. I like that.
Yeah. And it works really well. I don't do it all the time, but for very complicated things, or when I'm not really sure what the best prompt will be, then I will do that. And I've gotten very good results.
Interesting. I've never done that. I have said, this is what I'm trying to do. Is there any more detail or any questions you want to ask me before answering? I found is a great tool.
Good for you.
This prompting strategy though, that's very interesting. That could probably save me some time and make me more effective at this. Okay.
Good. You can, my bill will be in the mail.
So, how does this all work? Do companies just come to you and your team and say, Andrea, I want to use AI better. How do I do it? And then you review how the business works, or are they coming to you with more pinpointed problems? Both.
It just depends on, it is a journey, right? So different companies are at different stages in their AI journey. So when we, our first intro combos that we'll have with organizations are really about us understanding where they are in their journey and what their understanding is, to try to understand what they're trying to do. So if they come to us and it's mostly FOMO driven, and it's, the board says we need an AI strategy, then we help with that. What we don't want to do is just leave them with just the strategy. So normally we try to suss out 2 or 3 or 4 really good use cases for them that have a good chance of, making a return on investment for them, not just, and we try to prioritize and pick the best one and say, okay, now if you were to implement this, here are the steps that we would do. So we'll do a roadmap as well.
Okay.
And we also will talk about adoption and training and, and governance, because everybody's using AI.
Mhm.
Most people are not using it within the corporate walls.
Okay.
So they're using free chat GPT and putting company information in free chat GPT or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like they're doing it. So we have shadow AI going on. And so most organizations will kind of want to govern that, put some policies in place, make sure that people, if you say no, you need to give them what is yes. So they have to have something approved. So we also help decide which is the best tool for you, for your organization. And it's often a combination of tools. And sometimes it's an application that's already built. So I want to give you one more case study.
Okay.
So we're not all about building if we don't need to build. There are already great, very niche AI applications out there on the market. One of the areas where this is really growing fast is in the legal area.
Okay.
So there are contract review, clause review, obviously research, very specific to the legal world. There are great third-party things out there already for that. So we're not going to, we wouldn't build that. We would say, let's help you evaluate which of these is best for you, right? It's always a make or buy decision. And another organization just came to us, a construction materials company, a building materials company. And it turned out that they had found an application to help them do predictive inventory. Like, in other words, to understand how much to order.
Okay.
And when to order to help them with their cash flow. So this was already out there. So there's no need for us to go ahead and build it. So there's so much exciting movement in this area. And there are a lot of players, and a lot of the players are startups. So, you do have to be careful. But I think there's a lot out there already, Austin. It's very exciting.
Very exciting. I think it's interesting we get the financial aspect of it. We hear the news headlines. We see the dollars and cents of the semiconductors making all this money right now and the projection that it's probably going to shift to software, et cetera. But it's good to actually hear about how certain companies are using it, right? The story that is actually leading to those dollars and cents. So I appreciate you sharing that. So as it pertains to AI, what are you most excited for that's not available to us yet?
Right now, AI is kind of the Wild West.
Okay.
And I do think we need to have and I don't mean to stifle growth, and I don't, I get it, but I do think we need a little more regulation.
Okay.
Around how models are trained and, kind of what's behind the scenes, whether they have any biases or not. I think that that's important to pull back the covers a little more and have more transparency.
Sure.
And some of these organizations are better at it than others. But for me, that is what I would like to see.
Sure. Yeah. And I bet I know it takes our politicians some time to wrap their head around new technology.
Yeah.
I don't think I think it was maybe five-ish years ago where Mark Zuckerberg went, I'm going to say this wrong, but in front of a bunch of politicians, and one of them was asking him, questions about social media that I think a 5-year-old could answer. Yeah, right. So, and it's not, they're focused on different things, right? And some of them are older.
They need to focus on this. The whole world, right now is trying to grapple with this question about some of the ethics here. And to circle back to the beginning of our conversation about the AI being a relationship, and I think this is partly why. Mm-hmm. We have to be very careful about how these tools are being used, what's behind the scenes, how the tools can prevent harm.
Right.
I think that that's really important. I think all the great things that are going to help businesses are going to happen. Mm-hmm. Because that's how our system works, right? The dollars are going to flow to the things that are going to be, help businesses. That's why I'm concerned that we need to make a conscious effort to think about these other issues.
Right. Okay. So, one last question.
All right.
How do you use AI in your personal life? You mentioned your prompting secret, which I'm definitely going to leverage. How are you using AI in your personal life?
Yeah. So I have found, as a consultant, as a, basically a knowledge worker, right? I have found that AI is super helpful in doing research. So to be frank with you, this is efficiency for my clients. So what used to take me 2 or 3 hours if I had to do research for a client, now takes, 10 minutes of prompting plus maybe 20 minutes of checking, right?
Okay.
So I always check, but these are huge benefits for my clients. So that I do all the time. I mentioned the meetings. I can't live without my meeting transcription and, my AI telling me what my next step is. Now I've come to depend on that. We have certainly used AI to, write code and to create applications.
Okay.
This whole vibe coding thing. To build a user interface I have used AI to create flowcharts based on, because we often have to map out business processes. So the AI can create those flowcharts. Oh my gosh. So many, I use AI in my daily life now. So many different ways. Don't take it away.
Right. It's like a personal assistant. It sounds like.
Yes. Don't take it away because I really need it.
Right. And I like how you said 10 minutes of prompting and then 20 minutes of checking. So you're spending twice as much time checking it as you are prompting it. And that's 30 minutes, but it's also saving you 3 hours.
Saving hours. But it's saving my client money. Do you understand? Like that's the promise here. That's the promise here. So it's exciting.
Right. That is exciting. So how do people find your group? Where do they go? Is there a website they can go to?
Withum.ai, actually.
So Withum.ai.
Yeah.
They can go there if they're interested in having a meeting with someone from your team, just exploring the concept more, or if they have a problem or if they want to read more. Okay, perfect. Well, Andrea, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to having you on again as AI keeps developing. It seems like we go leaps and bounds every couple months.
There'll be something new every week.
Yeah. Well, thank you
so much, Austin, for the opportunity.
Thank you.